I'm back! Happy New Year, family! I know some of you guys have been wondering why I haven't been as active lately. And the truth is, if I told you, I'd probably have to kill you. Totally kidding. No, but for real though, I've been working on projects that I plan on releasing on my channel in the near future, so you guys stay tuned. But I did want to drop a quick video to let you guys know that I'm still alive. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, today's topic of discussion will be Tacitus and his significance in Christian history. Most of the information that I'll be using in this video will be coming from this book by Josh and Sean McDowell called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Those of you who've been studying apologetics for a minute now are probably more than familiar with the book, but for the people just getting started, I recommend you go grab it ASAP. You won't regret it. It's like its own encyclopedia for apologetics. With that being said, let's hop into it. Cornelius Tacitus was a Roman historian who lived somewhere between 56 and 120 AD. The McDowells quote Robert Van Voorst in saying that Tacitus is considered the greatest Roman historian. Voorst also says that Tacitus, Tacitus had a set of writings known today as annals, and modern historians acknowledge it as the best source of information about that time period. By now, you're probably asking,
what does Tacitus got to do with me though?
For whatever reason, people continue to question or flat out deny that Jesus ever existed. Talk about some.
Show me a source outside the Bible.
Alright, bet. Ask and you shall receive. Now, before I read you the words of Tacitus, I gotta give you a little bit of background information so you'll understand the context. Capiche?
Now this is a story all about how
Nero burned down a city and blamed it on the Christians. The fire happened in AD 64 and the people was like,
"Oh Lord Jesus, it's a fire."
They was mad. So Nero had to shut it down, and what does he do? Blame the Christians.
Come on now, dawg. Come on, man.
I know, just terrible. So here's what Tacitus had to say about the whole ordeal.
Therefore, to squelch the rumor, Nero created scapegoats and subjected to the most refined tortures those whom the common people called Christians, hated for their abominable crimes. Their name comes from Christ, who during the reign of Tiberius had been executed by the procurator Pontius Pilate. Suppressed for the moment, the deadly superstition broke out again, not only in Judea, the land which originated this evil, but also in the city of Rome, where all sorts of horrendous and shameful practices from every part of the world converge and are fervently cultivated.
Reading this gives me Green Mile vibes.
He kill them with they love. That's how it is every day, all over the world.
Even though historians respect Tacitus' work as trustworthy, there are those who doubt its reliability based on the following potential objections. Numero uno. They claim that the writings of Tacitus were a forgery. Another potential problem is Tacitus' use of anachronisms in his writings, which I'll explain that later. And lastly, he's accused of using Christian testimony instead of independent witnesses. Josh and Sean have addressed all three of those objections in the book, so here's my attempt at summarizing their rebuttals. Was Tacitus a forgery? Did Christians fabricate this story to support their claims of a historical Jesus? Probably not. The McDowells quote Paul Barnett in saying,
No Christian would have described his fellows in Rome as a foreign cult needing to be checked, a disease belonging to the horrible and shameful things of the world that gravitate to Rome, a people hated for their vices, who have a hatred of the human race, and whose terrible punishment under Nero is justified.
In other words, if Christians had altered the writings of Tacitus, they probably wouldn't have referred to their fellow Christians in derogatory terms. Another reason to doubt that this document was forged by a Christian is because there's absolutely no mention of the resurrection. So let me get this straight. Christians formulated a plot to forge the writings of Tacitus so that they can trash talk themselves and conveniently leave out the resurrection, the message they were commissioned by Jesus himself to spread to the whole world, and the message they were willing to die for. Make it make sense. Lastly, Barnett states that the text is stylistically seamless. In other words, there's absolutely no evidence that it was edited or altered by anyone. You ever got a message from a friend on social media whose account got hacked? So a few months ago, a friend of mine, or somebody who I thought was a friend of mine, messaged me on Instagram and asked if I was interested in applying for a $45,000 forgivable grant. I was like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
$45,000! So anyway, then I start asking them personal questions because I'm trying to catch up or whatever, right?
How you been doing? How your mama now?
But they keep giving me responses that only relate to this $45,000. It's at this point that I realize I'm not talking to my homie. I'm talking to an imposter. Luckily, historians aren't quite as gullible as Miss Titus too. So if there was a forgery, they probably would have caught it. Procurator versus prefect. Who cares, right? A popular argument against the reliability of Tacitus is his use of the word procurator instead of prefect when referencing Pontius Pilate. Here we have what's called an anachronism. An anachronism is a chronological misplacing of people, events, customs, or objects. If you were reading a biography on, say, Martin Luther King Jr., and in this biography they claim that he typed out his speeches on a MacBook Pro and then stored them on his Google Drive, you know that biography is garbage. Think Back to the Future. Marty McFly was anachronizing like a mug. Yes, I made up the word anachronizing.
Who gonna check me, boo?
This man was playing lead guitar at his mama and daddy's prom, decades before he was even born. Anachronism. Tacitus called Pontius Pilate the procurator. Now, a procurator is a Roman official who had administrative power and who was responsible for taking care of other people's financial affairs. The only problem is the Pontius Pilate stone, or the Pilate stone, that was discovered in 1961 confirms his title as Prefectus Judea. So who's right? Tacitus or the stone? The stone or Tacitus?
Aha! Aha!
The answer is both.
How, Sway?
Gregory A. Boyd and Paul Rhodes Eddy have an explanation for this.
Regarding the ascription itself, it's entirely possible that Tacitus was intentionally anachronistic for the sake of clarity. Since procurator was the accepted title of Pilate's position among Tacitus' audience, he may have used the term knowing full well that the position used to be titled prefect. But it's even more likely that we're making too much of the distinction between procurator and prefect in the ancient world, for the evidence suggests that these terms were rather fluid in the first century. For example, though the Pilate stone discovered at Caesarea Maritima gives Pilate the title prefect, both Philo and Josephus refer to him as procurator, just as Tacitus does. In fact, Josephus sometimes uses the two terms interchangeably.
Procurator and prefect. Pretty much the same thing. Tacitus can't be trusted because he used the term Christ instead of the name Jesus. And this proves that he used Christian witnesses instead of independent witnesses who would have been way more trustworthy. Nice try, but no cigar. Listen to what Eddy and Boyd have to say about this.
It's improbable that Tacitus, who elsewhere proves himself to be a reliable historian, who routinely consults sources, would at this point rely solely on the hearsay of a group he himself identifies as a pernicious superstition and as evil. Moreover, by the early 2nd century, Christ and Jesus could be used interchangeably, both by Christians and non-Christians.
Eddy and Boyd continue on by giving 3 more considerations as evidence that Tacitus would have been more likely to use reliable sources. Here's what they have to say.
First, the subject of the passage is an official action taken by a Roman emperor. Second, Tacitus consistently reflects an unusual fascination with and animosity toward pretenders and superstitions, particularly those connected with claims of having been raised from the dead. And third, throughout his work, Tacitus is very concerned with the happenings of members of the royal court, and there is some indication that several members of the royal family had aligned themselves with this cult. All of this explains why Tacitus speaks so acrimoniously about the pernicious superstition of the Christian movement, even though he's clearly moved by the horrendous pain Nero inflicted on them. But it also suggests that if ever Tacitus would have been concerned to check out his information, it would have been in a context such as the one we're considering.
Robert Van Voorst piggybacks on the findings of Eddy and Boyd and has this to say.
To say where he did not get his information is easier than to show where he did. First, Tacitus certainly did not draw, directly or indirectly, on writings that came from the New Testament. No literary or oral dependence can be demonstrated between his description and the gospel accounts. The wording is too different. The only commonality is the name Pontius Pilate, and this could easily come from elsewhere. Nor did Tacitus likely draw his information from another Christian document, if his contempt for Christianity is any indication. Second, Tacitus does not seem to have drawn on general hearsay.
So to summarize what we've just read, it's unlikely that Tacitus would have relied on Christian testimony, being that he thought Christians were superstitious, and it seems like he was pretty annoyed at the fact that some of the royal family became Christians. And it's unlikely that he would have got his information from the New Testament, being that his writings aren't similar to the New Testament. The only thing they have in common is that they both mention Pontius Pilate. Tacitus didn't even like Christians, so it doesn't make sense that he would have used their testimony. So if it didn't come from Christians, then where did it come from? Well, historians aren't quite sure about that, but Eddie and Boyd have given some possibilities.
We know he had access to the Acta Senatus, the Roman Senate's archives of his activities. Those Roman records could have contained reports of Jesus' crucifixion, and he could have retrieved the details from there. Or he could have learned the facts while he was proconsul in Asia.
So you want a reliable, extra-biblical source for the existence of Jesus? Tacitus is your boy. His writings confirm that Jesus was crucified when Tiberius was emperor, just like the New Testament said. He confirms the spread of Christianity after Jesus' death and resurrection, just like the New Testament said. And the very real fact that Christians of the early church were persecuted in horrendous ways, just like the New Testament said. Josh and Sean don't mention this in this section of the book, but Tacitus also shows that Christianity was not forced on people as a means of control, like so many hoteps claim. The exact opposite is true. The gospel of Jesus Christ was a message that the government actively suppressed via persecution of the church. Remember what Tacitus wrote now.
Suppressed for the moment, the deadly superstition broke out again, not only in Judea, the land which originated this evil, but also in the city of Rome.
Tacitus may have hated Christians, but he sure did us a solid by writing about it. The irony. Now, if you like this video, help me out by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel, and feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time, guys, shalom, grace and peace. And go buy this book. I'm back, baby.